I'd be concerned about what government didn't do. But who's kidding who? Pay attention.
And now Broadside, the news with Jim Braude.
Coming up, I'll focus on the challenge of opening the ranks of management and executive leadership to more participation by women. My guest will be Massachusetts Labor Secretary Rachel Caprillion and Betsy Myers. She's the director of the Center for Women in Business at Bentley University. One of America's top women executives is spotlighting the question of why corporate America hasn't been more open to the rise of women as managers and CEOs. Sheryl Sandberg, she's the chief operating officer of Facebook, wrote, "Lean in, women work and the will to lead." And this week, Condoleezza Rice and Girl Scouts USA CEO Ana Maria Chavez joined Sandberg's campaign to ban the word bossy because they say it stigmatizes women who lead. Beyonce was part of that too, by the way. Yesterday, Massachusetts Governor Deval Patrick launched an initiative to do something about the problem. The Patrick administration will fund graduate fellowships to place women in state managerial jobs at full salary, and the fellowship is being developed with Bentley University and its Center for Women in Business. My guests are Rachel Caprillion, former state rep, former head of the Registry of Motor Vehicles, freed in January by Governor Patrick to be the State Secretary of Labor and Workforce Development. Hi there, Rachel.
Hi, Jim.
Never seen you look happier. And Betsy Myers, senior advisor to President Obama's campaign in 2011. Before that, she was President Clinton's senior advisor on women's issues. And since 2011, she's been director of the Center for Women in Business at Bentley University. Nice to see you and good to meet you, Betsy. Before we discuss what you plan to do in greater depth, let's discuss the why you're doing it to begin with. How serious is the problem of underrepresentation of women in top ranks of leadership in Massachusetts, Rachel?
Well, it is serious because it's about 13% of women on boards and 17% in C-suites. It is not nearly keeping pace with the number of women out in the workplace, and we're just not seeing that pipeline. We're not seeing that career ladder. You know,
I read in the Globe story that it talked about this yesterday. More than half of the state's largest publicly traded businesses have no female executive officers. Zero? None?
Many have zero. It is absolutely an issue that needs to be addressed and reversed.
Okay, Betsy Myers, you've been all over the country. Explain why in the most progressive state in America, at least according to us, the most progressive, how can this happen in a place like Massachusetts? I don't get it.
Well, what's really interesting is that in most companies, about 50% of middle management is women. And then there's this drop-off between middle management and senior management, as Rachel was saying, where the top jobs, the C-suite jobs and the board directors are anywhere from 10 to 15%.
What's C-suite mean? You both use that expression for the uninitiated.
It's the senior roles like vice president, CEO.
The big offices with the big windows.
So why the disconnect? Why so many in the middle? And so my radio co-host, Marjorie Egan, would say the reason why women can't rise anymore because they don't have wives. If they had wives, everything would work. I'm serious. That's what is that part of the, what is the problem?
Well, I think that's the interesting thing that we've been perplexed on for about the last 20 years. We haven't made as much progress as you think we would, and I think there's not one reason. There's several reasons, I think.
What are they?
Well, one, I think how are companies supporting women to move to those top jobs, embracing some of the issues that women and families have around the family issues. Some of the bias that, oh, well, maybe she wouldn't take that job because she has children, and then you have to look at the other side, which is what women do, some of the issues we have about not raising our hands, the confidence issues. Well, maybe I shouldn't.
I'm not blank enough.
Yes.
Or what if I can't do X? And what we're trying to encourage women to think is, what's the problem? How can I solve the problem?
There's another piece, at least your boss was on the radio with us today, and we asked him about this, and that would be Deval Patrick, for those who don't recall. We asked him about this today, and he analogized this to his friends, he said, who are African Americans on boards of directors. And he said it's the same African Americans who are my friends on this board and that board and that board. It's sort of like, you know, the old boys network, the old girls network, the old African American. Is that part of the problem, that essentially they're the same people? There's some representation, but it's the same women, the same African Americans, the same whatever, that are sort of all over the place. Is that legit?
Well, I think what you're talking about is a bench, and to make sure that the next generation, and that if there is a first, that there be a second, and a third, and a fourth. And the governor said that very compellingly. And we need to think about those women who are coming up and to encourage them, not just lean in, but in some cases, pull them in.
You know, before we discuss how you guys are going to try to fix this thing, the thing that I've been obsessed with years, I believe I'm right when I say this. You're the perfect person to ask, actually. I think we have the worst record of any state in America of electing women to Congress and to constitutional offices. I know we've only had 6 women ever in the United States Congress, ever. You know, what did Arizona have, 5 women out of 5 constitutional officers or something? We've had maybe a handful of women who've been constitutional officers. When that's the role model, when people in executive positions in government, I know that's not what you're focused on, are there none of them virtually, doesn't that trickle down in a bad way?
Well, it does. What we see at Bentley with young women students is they look, say, do I want to go to this company to work? And then they look and say, oh, there's not any women at the top, or there's just a couple women at the top. I can't get there, so I'm not even going to go, I'm not even going to try. Right, and so that's what happens, is that when women say, "Oh, I can do that, I can be that," right? They see a woman as a Secretary of Labor. I can be Secretary of Labor.
Okay, so what do you? Let's get to what exactly you're going to do. I mentioned a minute ago they're not internships. Whatever. What are they called? These
fellowships.
Fellowships.
Yeah,
pardon
and
me.
it's meaningful work, and it will be like within state government. We're encouraging private industry, nonprofits, other sectors of industry to take on a fellowship for a graduate student, woman graduate student, in all different realms at a management level, where they will get a real skill set, really make a contribution, and ensure that we get more women in the pipeline.
Okay, and so let's assume this is a wild success, and I know that you're going to make it that. Well, let's assume, then more than assume it's a wild success. That's a little blip on the screen. I'm not disparaging it at all. What's more of the fixed? What's the agenda here?
Well, we hope this will be a model for other states, and also a model for the business sector to join in with us to create this. And Bentley, the governor's team has asked Bentley to create the professional development around the internship fellowship opportunity.
Fellowship, not internship.
Fellowship, not internship.
Okay, I want to be clear here.
Because one thing is the opportunity, but the other thing is the support around the opportunity to make sure that women succeed.
If you administered sodium pentothal to the CEOs of all these companies and said, do you really think it's a problem that there's so few women in your upper ranks and on your boards of directors, again, under the influence of sodium pentothal? What would their answer? I assume the answer would be, no, I don't think it's a problem, or they'd fix it, wouldn't they, or would they?
I mean, they'd be wrong if they thought anything other than it is a
So why don't they fix it? It isn't, what are they going to say? There aren't binders and binders full of women? Is that the line? I mean, what is their line? It's sort of like, I can't find a qualified black, or I'd hire that black. I can't find a qualified woman, or I'd hire him. I mean, we know that there...
That is not...
No, but the numbers suggest that there's got to be some excuse for these people. It isn't like there's not a huge pool of qualified women, as you say, in those middle ranks.
Yeah, it's two-pronged. It's both. It's the women themselves to step in, to lean in, to say, may I work on that project? How can I help advance the mission? But it's also about considering an intentional way of having more women coming up through the ranks, and it is good for business.
Right. And here's the interesting thing. The whole reason we started the Center for Women in Business at Bentley was because our president, Gloria Larson, with the corporate partners we have, they were saying, wait a minute, we know the workforce has changed, and we know our customers changed. We know we need to have a workplace that reflects that. So we've been trying a few programs, but we haven't been able to move the numbers, because 9 out of 10 CEOs actually say, we know we need to harness the best talent. We know we need to have a balanced workplace, but we really haven't gotten to where we need to get to.
Speaking of CEOs, let's talk about COOs for a minute. At the top, I mentioned Sheryl Sandberg, obviously. What do you think about this campaign? I don't know if she means it literally, but at least figuratively, eliminate the word bossy. The implication for those who haven't followed this thing is that basically it's about the sentiment it evokes. That if a woman is too aggressive or assertive, she is seen as bossy, which is a pejorative. Do you agree with? Is she onto something, or is this a frivolous kind of thing?
No, I do think she's onto something, right? Because a lot of girls don't want to be called bossy, or they.
Yeah, it seems unseemly when it's actually if we said to these same girls that you're acting as a leader.
Right.
It would be very different than calling them bossy.
Right. It's a negative connotation, right? And so, I think it's just helping people think about things differently, and young girls to think about themselves differently. That it's a good thing to stand up and give voice to what I care about.
How much do role models matter? When the woman was just appointed a couple of months ago, I'm quite sure the first CEO of an auto company.
Yes, Mary Barra
at GM.
Yes.
Hill Holliday, we know locally here.
Karen.
When women in those mid-level positions see those role models, laws. Maybe not as many in government as I think all of us would like. I don't mean just state reps, and what I don't mean just state reps. So I mean, you know what I mean.
Yes.
But when they see people in those top positions, is there any statistical evidence that actually, other than women saying, yeah, that's great, that it actually has an effect on their rise within the corporate structures?
Yes, because they can see I can do that, right? It's a belief that that looks like me, and it does make a difference. And you know, when you go back to when you remember when President Clinton appointed Madeleine Albright to be the first woman Secretary of State, and it was just unprecedented, and he got a lot of pushback that if you bring her in, you know, we will lose respect in foreign policy. And then what happened was women, right after the next, it was Colin Powell, but then Condi Rice, and then Hillary Clinton, right? And we had many years without a man at the head of the State Department. So it makes a difference.
Yeah, you know, second.
And as Duvall said, right?
Yes.
It's not about the first.
Yes,
right?
there's a second and a third.
Yes.
And Mary Barra started her career at GM, worked her way all the way up, and there isn't anyone that could say that she wasn't ready and qualified.
You know, I'm often accused of saying that government should get involved in situations where lots of people think they shouldn't. Some Western European countries have decided we're not going to wait any longer. I think I'm right about this. And they have laws that mandate that on a publicly traded corporation, the key word being publicly traded, that there must be a certain level of representation. If it turns out after all these years we're not making nearly as much progress as not just you, but people at home would find satisfactory, is it inappropriate for government to say we're going to step in if the private sector doesn't fix itself?
Well, I don't think we're there yet. You know, I think that we really need to think about the reasons why there aren't more women and really look at all of those factors. And some of it is about just the pressures of family balance, and women disproportionately are caregivers. You know, how do we begin to change that?
What do you, I mean, other than the wife thing I mentioned, I mean, seriously, how do you fix that? That is the culture of this country.
There are solutions.
And you know what? Some of the companies are trying interesting things. So, for example, Farmers Insurance out in California, in their claims department, tried something where they said no meetings before 9 in the morning or after 4. And so that, because it's not just women,
to be sensitive to caregivers,
but it's
whether
not,
it's a,
right, but it's not just women, it's men too that are more engaged in their children's lives. And millennial generation are workers that are going to be 50% of the workplace. That is that generation, both men and women, say we want to be more involved in our kids' lives.
Speaking of more involved, people want to find out about this thing. Where do they go? What do they do? Do they go to your website? What do they do?
Well, we have a website set up at the Bentley University.
What is the website? You have no idea, right?
Well, it's new. It's being added. It's if you're interested in the fellowship, there's going to be some information there, and the task force. We're developing the members of the task force.
So if they go to the Bentley Center for Women in Business for now, ultimately there'll be something that they can connect to.
There is on the website, the Center for Women in Business website. There is the information about the fellowship, and people can put their information in if they're interested.
Oh, really?
And
we're
ready.
We'll have a link on our page, and it's all going to be coordinated.
Rachel Cabrillion, it's great to see you.
Great to see you, Jim.
Betsy Myers, it's great to meet you. Thanks so much. Good luck with your project.
Thank you.
Next, Tim Kelly hits the slopes, and Nellie Carreño tells you how much it snowed. Stay tuned.